Okay.
All right, Andrew. So we got some mail,
We got
uh,
mail.
and I thought, if somebody takes and makes the effort to write something and ask some questions, maybe we use that as a starting off point for conversation. And so my
Yes,
idea
it
was
was part of our
just
huge mailbox with 10,000 letters of
exactly, and so we
arriving.
cherry
And so we
picked the
picked the
best one.
best one. We picked the best one
Yeah.
of all the thousands of letters that we receive because
Yes.
of our enormous viewership.
Yes. Exactly. Not though.
And I also want to say, I want to say something. I want to say happy year of the water hare, because in the Tibetan tradition, it's a New Year's Day today.
Oh,
It's
amazing. Okay.
so the last 10 days were the days they're called the mamos, and the mamos are demons that eat you alive, and they come in the last 10 days. So if you had a really hard time in the last 10 days, it's because you've been fighting with the mamos. But the mamos are pacified now, and we're moving into the new year.
That's interesting because I couldn't
They're
sleep.
like vampires, mamos, and it's like the lowest energy point of the year, kind of, because it's February, and bad shit tends to happen at that time of year.
Interesting. I couldn't sleep very well the last
There you
days.
go. There you go.
Maybe.
But it's all beginning again. It's a new beginning starting today, Tom.
Wow. Amazing. So, should I read the email or what?
Please, please.
Okay, it's from a guy named Derek. I won't divulge his full name here. And so he wrote a letter. I'm reading it and then we can go, letter by sentence by sentence. So he writes, I know I'm writing this in a response to an older episode of the Parallax View, so it may be that these thoughts are no longer relevant to your ongoing discussions, but I wondered if they might generate any further thought you care to share. The conversation in episode 53, and I have literally no idea what we were talking about there, Andrew. The conversation in episode 53 has me asking if metamodernism might be thought of as a modernism made anxious by the existential awareness of humanity's end. In which end would we then question the position of tradition, since tradition without futurity seems to lose its value? Does the contemporary force us to confront the failure of tradition in producing the modern moment? Could the war in Ukraine then be thought of as a product of tradition's failure? We might say that by looking to the past to recognize tradition and by placing value in those traditions, we almost guarantee repetition. Okay, he asked a lot of questions there, but let's
Yeah,
start.
there's a lot there. I can see.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a,
So so he goes on with it, but just let's start with the first thing. So in conversation, the conversation episode 53 has me asking if metamodernism might be thought of as a modernism made anxious by the existential awareness of humanity's end. That alone is a very interesting question, I think. What do you think about that,
yeah.
Andrew?
Well, I was thinking about my own nature, and I tend to be sort of antinomian by nature, and also studying Tantric Buddhism, it tends to be antinomian. So I tend to not like categories like metamodernism. I tend to want to, just by nature, I want to sort of smash them. I want to kind of like, I want to give a middle finger to metamodernism, which is not really fair, because I'm sure there's tons of brilliant people out there who are supporting metamodernism. But yes, this anxiety that he speaks of is really, I think that is this kind of end of the world anxiety mixed with utopianism.
Yeah.
Probably characterizes metamodernism, and I don't believe in either. Like, I don't believe we're heading, like, we're all, it could be that we're all, drinking champagne on the Titanic, and that we should, the end of the world is on the way, and and all this sort of extinction rebellion. But that almost feels like a kind of a religion to me, or a kind of a dogma to me, or a kind of,
Right.
and then mix that with this sort of, I guess, metamodernism is a kind of optimism at the same time. So you're supposed to vacillate between optimism and end of the world, the sort of apocalypticism.
Yeah.
That doesn't really work for me so much. And the idea that tradition is over, and tradition is just, that doesn't work with me either, because I think we're always working within all kinds of traditions, which are always evolving and and so it's not like there's tradition is dead and now we have to embrace modernism. That's I never believed that very
Yeah.
much. That is kind of the postmodern position. So there's a lot of sort of assumptions in those things that I don't really follow those assumptions. I don't follow the assumptions of metamodernism unless it is like I do think there should be a constructive. I think there should be a constructive movement, but and that there should be reinvention. But I think that's a thread that continues from the past and will continue in the future, and that this sort of end of the world sensibility is a bit neurotic and cult like, and
Yeah.
although we are facing pretty severe dangers, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's a saying in Germany, and I don't know if there's a counterpart in the English language. You have a saying that man isst es nicht so heiß, wie es gekocht wird. And that means you don't eat the food as hot as it is cooked, right? And so you have all these kind of dramas that are going around now, but you have to find some patience and some some distance to see that these kinds of partake to the human experience, and that we need drama. And if you would have been born in the 19th century, in like 1900, you will be looking for 60-70 years of only drama, like First World War and Spanish flu and Second World War and depression and Vietnam War and so on and so forth. And yeah, we have our crisis, but I don't feel like it's the end of the world kind of thing.
Well, it's getting worse and getting better at the same time. There's a lot of things that are, people are waking up to, and it's improving. The world's improving in a lot of ways. We don't have as much starvation.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, there is something kind of worrying going on. And I think, I was looking at images of sort of Ukraine and Biden going to Ukraine and sort of having a photo shoot there. Which makes it really clear that there's a proxy war going on between Russia and the United States, and a war between Russia and the United States, proxy or otherwise, is going to cause more horrors, for sure. But we've always lived with horrors. There's always been horrors. I guess nuclear horror is something
I was talking with a friend yesterday about this, because I mean, like, it seems that we have forgotten the lectures of the past, because after Second World War, it was like never again, like literally never again, because we know what that looks like if we want the total war and and
there's no never again.
Exactly. But I mean, the media still, it still seems to me they all want war, and it's like it's to try to find a peaceful solution to the process, and that's out of the question right now. That is how it seems to me. And so I think he asked that when he asked, like, let me go back to this email. War would itself be tradition with an ascribed value. We might say that by looking to the past to recognize tradition, and by placing value in these traditions, we almost guarantee repetition. War would itself be a tradition with an ascribed value. Metamodernism could be a rejection of tradition as value that allows movement towards an unassumed future. And so I think he talks about this, what Nietzsche calls, the reoccurring of the same, no?
Yes. Well, he's defining tradition as repetition, whereas I would say that tradition is not repetition. Tradition is always evolving. So he's making a stark contrast between tradition, like tradition is war, right? The eternal recurrence of the same, and then metamodernism rejects war. Is that what good luck with that. And goes beyond tradition. No, that's just more utopianism.
Well, technically, tradition repeats itself because it's like to conserve, to repeat that what is known, you know. So the very idea of tradition is to repeat the behavior.
Yeah, you repeat it, but with each repetition, there's a slight shift or a change, right? It's like when you repeat a ritual, you every time you do it, you do the same ritual, but every time you do it, there's
Yeah,
there's a different quality to it, and
yes.
it evolves and deepens.
Yeah.
And also, I don't think that there's kind of like in Christianity, there's like the Bible and Jesus came, and that's the tradition, and there's no other tradition. They kind of have this triumphalist view of tradition often. Whereas in other, even in Gnostic Christianity, there's different revelations that come at different times and different sort of evolutions of the tradition, and so in the Tantric Buddhist tradition, you have the Dharma tradition, which is text for the future. So you have all these. So it's not like there's the Bible and then everything else is just. It's more like the traditions adapt to the culture or to what's going on, and there are new iterations of these primary sort of truths, which are more adaptable to the time. So in the Terma tradition, there are texts that are discovered in caves and stuff for the future, right? Which I think is kind of interesting.
Mm.
So there would be scripture there's scripture. It's not just like there was this one Bible and that has everything in it, and you just have to follow that. It's that okay, there's more scriptures coming, more revelations coming, more. So I don't see I don't see tradition as being the static thing in the way that he's sort of assuming that it is.
Right.
But there are some things about human nature which never change, like war, And I think the war in Ukraine is sort of reminding people in the West that if you don't do certain things, war is kind of inevitable.
Mm. Yeah, but isn't the utopian view and the hope that we overcome war at some point? Or is it really a thing that is so deeply ingrained into human nature that we really can't change that, even like in 5,000 years in the future? Is there
Maybe
like
in 5,000 years in the future, maybe something will change. I don't know. I would say that, this is a messianic kind of view of the Jews. Is like, okay, it's just like that. You need a messianic principle needs to come, and that will save us from this. But I don't know. On the other hand, this world kind of doesn't change in some senses. Like, the war is like between people. It's very deep in the psyche, and so there's the wars that are happening out there, but then there's also the dramas that happen between human beings in a peaceful society. People are committing suicide.
I do
drug
understand.
addicts and.
I do understand if certain parts of Africa or wherever go at war, and but as the West, who has like a history of enlightenment for at least 250 years,
Does it?
Yeah, well, the
Have a
enlightenment.
history of enlightenment.
Sure, So isn't there really not a different solution to the Ukraine problem instead of just sending over more tanks and planes? Is there no other solution? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, there should be, and there has to be, but I don't know what that is. I mean, I guess a conflagration of the war of all against all right now, will lead to this apocalypse that everybody is kind of talking about. I don't know. I don't think that will happen. I think people kind of go to the edge and then they step back.
Yeah, you're an optimist. I see that.
Maybe people go over the edge. I don't know. I mean, it's too horrible to contemplate, really. I mean, if it happens on a large scale again, like in Europe, and you can't have the Second World War anymore. The weapons are too brutal. They're too deadly. They're too effective. They're too, they'll have to have a cyber war or some other kind of war. But actual physical war, like the way they're doing it in Ukraine, it's kind of odd. It's kind of anachronistic or something.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, but they're like, tanks and guns and all that sort of thing. It's kind of anachronistic as a way of fighting a war. Um, and it's between, and it's, when there's nuclear weapons, because it can't be a full-on war because there's always these nuclear weapons in the background, right?
Right.
So if it was like Russia, it was Napoleon, versus the Austrian Emperor or something like that, they could go a full-on war against each other because there was no existential endpoint.
Yeah. I
But
don't know. I mean, the point that he's raising, it's interesting because, like, I mean, for all intents and purposes, metamodernism is still a form of modernism. Otherwise, it's just like a reaction of metamodernism against itself or for itself. As in the same way, postmodernism was a modern reaction against the horrors of modernity, right? And so, what metamodernism is a kind of positivist, optimist reaction of the good parts of modernism. You can, it's like it's
mm-hmm.
you can frame it certainly as that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
which,
guess my antinomian nature comes up again and says that the utopianism is
the
pretty
what?
ineffectual. Utopian view is usually pretty ineffectual, and also it doesn't feel like a movement. It feels like a bunch of intellectuals.
Yeah, well, depending on what you're reading, no, which kind of interpretation you're reading,
Mm.
because
Well,
it's
like I was
because it's
reading
not
the
just.
the
Hmm?
the Kazazansky, I think his name is. He wrote Zorba the Greek. Do you know
Oh
this
yeah.
writer? And I was reading his biography,
Yeah.
and he was born in Crete, and he became a. First, he was sort of he wanted to study Christianity, and then he got bored of Christianity, went to Buddhism, and and then he became a Marxist, and and at the end of his life, he went to Russia, and at that time, man, Marxism was powerful.
Mm.
You know, Marxism was terrifying and powerful, and all the good people were Marxists, right? Because there was so much corruption in the civilization. But then we saw what Marxists became.
Right.
We saw what the Russian Revolution became. But before, it was like getting a snapshot of all the hope and optimism and power of that idea before it became very dark.
Mm. I mean, I think what we experience as individuals might reflect on how we can look at society as well. Because last time we were talking about the diamond as an individual experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's like, what is the diamond? Or you called it the divine double. This blue figure on the card, Jodorowsky card, the Judgment, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you
Mm-hmm.
hear the call, and so it's like always that is an utopia and like a personal utopia, and the idea of the fully formed self, which enacts in full resonance with the world. And
Yeah.
then when you do that, you're obviously not only confronted with your own utopia, but also with the problems that arise acting like this in the world. And so the vision gets diluted, and then you have to go after a while into meditation again to renew this new image of what you can be, this divine
Mm-hmm.
calling from the future. And I think in some sense that happens also in society, that there are utopias and there are like new all-encompassing new ideas, and then they trickle down and they get diluted, and they got
Yeah.
distorted, and then society has to bring forth another new idea, and that is like a dialectical process, that we are like collectively trying to find out who we are, and throwing ourselves into future, and dealing with the consequences of that. You know what I'm saying? And so like
Sure.
at
Yeah.
at one point Marxism was that shiny light that was worthwhile rallying towards.
Yeah.
um
But the question is, was it systematically broken already? Was it just a wrong view? you know, or or is this just, are we just going to throw it away and say, oh, it's dialectical? You know, I don't know. I don't
No,
know about that.
now we see the flaws, but back then, it
Yeah,
was a shiny new vision, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Before it was like, I think we talked about this, about the process of writing. You know, you have an idea. You don't know really what it is. You want to start to write an essay, right? But you
Yep.
only know what it is by following all these different arguments, right?
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
by the end of writing an essay, you know what you're writing about. It's like you have differentiated your initial idea. But the initial idea, that, you know, that thing that was calling you don't know what that is. And I think like communism was like that. It was an idea, but it wasn't fleshed out yet.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, yeah. Well, I don't know. Like metamodernism. I mean, I don't really like. I don't. You said that we've had the Enlightenment for 250 years.
Yeah,
To me, that that enlightenment isn't an enlightenment. It's more like um, it was more like a well, there was aspects of it. Yeah, I guess maybe humanism came into power. So first, people used to be God centered,
yeah,
and then they became human centered, and then the
yeah,
quantum age came, and they became sort of uh, you know let's say that there is no center.
yeah,
And now modernism is trying to find the center while keeping the idea that there is no center.
yeah. There's the thing with enlightenment, because I think, sorry, my thing is acting up again. But the thing with enlightenment, I think the problem is also kind of the what is it called, the translation. Because if you, in German, it's Aufklärung, enlightenment. That there are no spiritual connotations in there, right?
Yes,
And
exactly
what
correct. Yeah.
and so what Kant, I was just looking it up. What Kant made, like in meant in, you know, his essay, was is Aufklärung, what is enlightenment? There's no spiritual connotation in there. He says enlightenment is the man's emergence from his self-imposed noonage. Noonage is the inability to use one's own understanding with another guidance. You get what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
so enlightenment does not necessarily mean um,
It means
something
individualism.
spiritual. Hmm?
It means individualism.
Yeah, it means I'm completely self-responsible for my own experience of the world,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But that's sort of, yeah, that is kind of the humanism, right? And that was this, it's not just Kant, it's also the discovery of perspective in art,
Yes. Mm.
which came before Kant, which is like, okay, this is the human perspective, right? Art became about the human perspective, and there's this realism that comes into art.
Yes.
But the thing about the realism is it just makes it more unreal, in a way, because that's why I guess Cubism and Impressionism and all these other forms of art had to be invented to smash this hyper realism and human centric view
Yeah.
as well. So Kant probably exists within the sort of human centric model,
Yeah, but the
or
beauty
the
of it
model of
is,
individualism, which is kind of a step forward and backwards at the same time.
yeah. Yeah, but the beauty of Kant's definition, which is like what, 300 years old now, of Aufklärung, of enlightenment, is that we're still working on that, on, you know, on our self-responsibility, on, you know,
Mm,
it's like that's what we are doing. That's like what
yeah.
we are all doing, like all the time. And so it's like kind of the defining meme of the West in a kind of sense, you know. And so even metamodernism as a way of looking, like oscillating between, you know, irony and sincerity, and like hopefulness and positivity. It's like, yeah, you do this. This is something that you do, that is you enacting a form of self-responsibility while enacting in the world.
Hmm.
And so it's
Hmm.
still a modern phenomenon in that sense.
Hmm. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
The Sufis would say like okay, well, in order to stop war, you have to practice meditation. You have to create samadhi,
right,
concentrated effort, and union with the divine, because the samadhi that you create, which is concentrated meditation, just concentrate, uh, is like food for the god. And if you don't feed the gods that food, then they will create war because they have nothing to eat. I think
yeah,
anyway, I'm changing gears here quite a bit, but to modernism. So I tend to look at I tend to look at the things like that rather um, than philosophy, uh, in the sense that war is so horrific and irrational, but it's sort of inevitable unless you. That's what I was trying to say. Unless you do this kind of if unless you make this offering to the
right,
divine, right? Unless people have strong enough spiritual um samadhi. If people don't have the strong enough spiritual samadhi, then we just fall back into this primitive state of war, right? Which is maybe the primitive, the actual state of who we are, right? It is
right.
like tribes were always at war with each other because whoever was outside of the tribe was an enemy. And if we're in this, if we're trying to protect our tribe, and we'll always be at war. So how do we go beyond that? Am
Yeah.
I making sense here, or am I just
No, no,
babbling? I
it's
don't
I
know.
know it's no, it's of course a valid perspective. I'm just approaching this topic at the moment more from a political kind of point of view. It's just like because
But it's the same. It's sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
no, because it's like if you look at what happened, let's say 1990, so there was a unification of Germany, right?
Hmm.
And there was like Gorbachev, and there was like the old Bush, and there was like the elder statesmen of Germany, like Kohl and Genscher. And these people, they knew what war meant because they grew up after the war. And what happened was not only that they knew exactly what war meant, but they also knew they had a 40-year experience in the business of making politics. It's because you can't just go after the university, go into politics and expect that what it how to deal with international crisis. And so it's you have to go through the ranks, and then when you're like 60, 70, you have maybe enough experience to deal with all these international problems. And that was the
Hmm.
very reason that the foreign minister from Germany, Hans Dietrich Genscher, was explicitly against the NATO East expansion,
Hmm.
because that what we are seeing now is that the NATO is just expanding to the east, and it's like, oh no, it's like we don't know where this conflict comes from. And then you have like an utterly unexperienced person like the German foreign minister Baerbock, who is like, what is she, like 40? Like, she has no experience whatsoever. She just wants to create a foreign ministry which is like explicitly feminist. It's like you can't even make this shit up. And so it's like people don't know what war means anymore, and they don't have any experience. And I get where you're coming from with your spiritual perspective, and that is certainly true. But at the same time, we are like confronted with the fact that they're utterly incompetent people driving, the boat at
Yeah,
the
but
moment.
maybe there is a link between what I'm saying and you're saying, and the fact that the utterly incompetent people have no spiritual compass, right? They're just ideologues.
Right.
So that's why I could say meditation or prayer or practices, like even at that time I would say that there was still these guys who were doing politics were still related in some way to the church, and they had some kind of a larger vision. I'm not
Yeah.
saying we should go back to that or anything like that, but but you do need a larger vision. Like even whatever the movements of the civil rights and all that, there's kind of a larger spiritual vision there.
Yeah.
And but if it's just this modernist vision, I think it's not strong enough. It's not powerful enough. It's not big enough. Metamodernism is not big enough as a
I
vision.
know,
It's
but
not.
this
It has
is
no
my point.
power. It's like powerless as a vision. It feels like that to me anyway. Um,
But that's what I'm saying. I think maybe we are not modern enough. That's the point. The problem is that we need more modernism to end the wars, because and more metamodernism to end the wars. It's just like, because then you can navigate this whole thing responsibly. You don't fall
mhm.
victim to being possessed by the memes of the narratives of the media, which just want war at the moment. No, you can.
But isn't the media modernism? That's what I would say. Like the media is entirely modernism. That's
No,
kind
at
of
the
like
moment it's completely tribal.
yes, yeah,
The
but
system itself is modern, yes, but what they're doing now is like producing tribal memes. We against them. We have to go. That's tribal thinking, and that's what the system is producing right now. And so they should produce more memes and narratives that are more modern itself. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. What do you mean by what like modern? Like yeah, I guess so.
Instead of saying, "Oh no, we need more guns and tanks," they should ask, "So how do we have more dialogue?"
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, they have to be a bit more pragmatic and see through the fucking ideologies.
That's what I mean.
In
Yeah,
definitely, God. I mean, people are cheering Biden, going and hugging Zelensky, and nothing against those guys or Zelensky, but what if this kind of jingoism is going to lead to a preemptive nuclear attack from Russia and make it even worse? Like what are we really doing? So it seems like yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I
right,
think there has to be some much more intelligent diplomacy
right.
and not a jingoistic kind of pro-war thing, which is hurting everybody probably. And I
Yeah,
guess what you're saying by modernity is just be rational about the whole thing. So that's true.
yeah.
And
Because if
see
you if you're
through the
possessed,
mythologies and see through the dreams and see through the complete media bullshit.
if you are possessed by some memes, you're directly conflicting what Kant said. Enlightenment is the man's emergence from his own self-imposed noonage. Noonage is the inability to use one's own understanding without another guidance. That's, if you're
Mhm.
possessed by memes and narratives, it's like, no, you're not, you're just a copy of what society and the media is feeding you. Like, take some responsibility.
Yeah, but you said that's why I think meditation is important because you can't help doing that unless you're able to dissolve these memes inside of you, right?
Right.
Because we absorb so much ideology through media. And I think this is one of the reasons why meditation was invented, because we have to be able to dissolve that and empty ourselves out of that so we can think clearly and see clearly and act in a clear
Exactly.
way. Otherwise, we're just going to be possessed by whatever it is that is happening. Um,
Yeah.
so that's why I keep coming back to that as being like, okay, meditation, not maybe in the sense of sitting and doing Buddhist meditation, but in the sense of deep contemplation rather than um, playing more culture war games or whatever.
I completely agree, Andrew.
Yeah.
I think we have to cut it short today because yeah, we have other things to do.
Yeah.
No? Yeah. So
Yes. So so
so
again, happy year of the water rabbit.